The air in the conference room was thick, heavy with the scent of stale coffee and nervous anticipation. It clung to me like a second skin, amplifying the slight tremor in my hands as I smoothed down the skirt of my navy blue suit. The wool itched, a persistent irritant against the backdrop of already frayed nerves. My carefully rehearsed opening statement, a masterpiece of diplomatic rhetoric crafted to defend France's position on nuclear disarmament, suddenly felt brittle and inadequate. I took a deep breath, trying to quell the rising tide of anxiety, and that's when I saw her. Across the room, amidst a sea of ill-fitting suits and anxious whispers, she sat, a beacon of quiet confidence. Representing Brazil, her dark hair was pulled back in a sleek ponytail, revealing the elegant curve of her neck. Her gray eyes, sharp and intelligent, scanned the room with an intensity that sent a surprising jolt through me. I'd studied the delegate rosters, of course, memorized names and countries, but somehow, I'd missed her. Cameron. Even her name, strong and unflinching, held a certain allure. She exuded an energy, a quiet power, that drew me in like a moth to a flame, making me forget for a moment the weight of the impending debate. The simulated debate commenced. A flurry of carefully worded arguments and thinly veiled accusations. I delivered my opening statement, my voice surprisingly steady despite the inner turmoil her presence had ignited. I watched her as I spoke, noting the subtle shift in her expression, the slight furrow of her brow, the almost imperceptible nod of acknowledgement. When it was her turn to speak, the room seemed to fall silent. Her voice, husky and low, resonated with a passion that was both captivating and unsettling. She dismantled my carefully constructed arguments with a cool confidence that both infuriated and, if I was honest with myself, intensely intrigued me. Her words, precise and incisive, cut through the diplomatic jargon, exposing the raw nerves of the issue. I found myself hanging on every word, my initial annoyance giving way to a reluctant admiration. It wasn't just the strength of her arguments. It was the way she commanded the room, the way her gray eyes seemed to hold a depth of understanding that belied her youthful appearance. After the debate, the tension in the room slowly dissipated, replaced by the low hum of post-debate analysis. I found myself standing near the coffee urn, absently stirring a lukewarm cup, my mind still replaying Cameron's words, the cadence of her voice echoing in my ears. I felt a strange mix of emotions, frustration at having my argument so effectively challenged, and a burgeoning curiosity about the woman who had so effortlessly managed to do so. I glanced across the room, hoping to catch her eye, but she was surrounded by a group of delegates, her head tilted in animated conversation. Just as I was about to turn away, she looked up, her gaze meeting mine across the crowded room. For a moment, time seemed to stand still. Her eyes held mine, a silent acknowledgement passing between us. A flicker of something, unspoken. Then, just as quickly, she looked away, turning her attention back to the conversation at hand. I lingered by the coffee urn for a few minutes longer, pretending to be engrossed in the tepid liquid, my heart beating a little faster than usual. Was it the caffeine, or the lingering aftershocks of the debate? Or perhaps, I admitted to myself with a surprising thrill, it was the lingering effect of Cameron's intense gray eyes. As I finally turned to leave, I found myself face to face with her. She stood a few inches taller than me, close enough that I could catch the subtle scent of her perfume, something clean and woodsy. An awkward silence hung between us, broken only by the clatter of cups and the muffled conversation swirling around us. Finally she spoke, her voice softer now, less formal than in the debate. "France, huh?" she said, a hint of a smile playing on her lips. "Ambitious." The way she said it, the slight inflection in her voice, sent an unexpected shiver down my spine. It wasn't a question, nor a statement of disapproval. It was something else entirely. Something that made me want to stay there, in that crowded, stuffy conference room, and learn the language hidden in her gray eyes. "Ambitious," I echoed, a nervous laugh escaping my lips. Someone had to be. The tension between us, thick and palpable just moments before, seemed to dissipate, replaced by a curious spark of connection. We talked for what felt like minutes, but was probably closer to an hour, discussing everything from the complexities of international diplomacy to our shared love of obscure French cinema. I discovered that beneath her sharp debating skills and unwavering confidence lay a dry wit and a surprisingly vulnerable side. She spoke passionately about her work with a local non-profit, advocating for social justice and community empowerment. I found myself drawn to her fiery spirit, her unwavering commitment to making a difference in the world. It was a stark contrast to my carefully curated world of wine tastings and gallery openings, and yet it resonated with a part of me I hadn't realized was dormant. Over the next few weeks, our impromptu coffee break blossomed into a series of carefully planned encounters. We explored Durham's vibrant nightlife together, discovering hidden gems tucked away in quiet corners of the city. Dimly lit jazz clubs with soulful melodies spilling out onto the streets, bustling bars serving locally brewed craft beers, late-night conversations over steaming cups of chai in cozy cafes. Each encounter revealed more layers of Cameron's complex personality. She challenged my preconceived notions, pushed me to think beyond my own privileged world, and made me laugh harder than I had in years. I found myself anticipating our next meeting with a growing sense of excitement, a feeling that had nothing to do with the simulated world of Model UN, and everything to do with the very real connection we were forging. The crisp autumn air, tinged with the scent of fallen leaves and wood smoke, seemed to crackle with an unspoken energy whenever we were together. One cool October evening, we found ourselves perched on the rooftop bar of a trendy downtown hotel. The city lights spread out before us like a glittering tapestry. The air was crisp and cool, a welcome reprieve from the lingering warmth of the day. We sipped our drinks, the clinking of ice a subtle counterpoint to the low hum of conversation around us. We talked about everything and nothing, our words weaving a tapestry of shared experiences and budding dreams. As the night deepened and the stars began to prick the darkening sky, a comfortable silence settled between us. I turned to Cameron, about to comment on the breathtaking view, but the words caught in my throat. She was looking at me, her gray eyes reflecting the city lights, and in that moment I felt a shift, a subtle change in the atmosphere between us. She leaned in, her breath warm against my ear, sending a shiver down my spine. "You know," she whispered, her voice husky and low, "I never thought I'd find someone so captivating." On the opposing side of a nuclear debate, my face flushed, a wave of heat rising from my neck to my cheeks. My pulse quickened, a frantic drumbeat against my ribs. I wanted to say something witty, something clever, but the words seemed to evaporate before they reached my lips. I simply stared at her, mesmerized by the intensity of her gaze. The city lights blurred around us, fading into insignificance against the backdrop of this sudden electric connection. I reached out, my fingers brushing against hers, a tentative touch that spoke volumes. She didn't flinch, didn't pull away. Instead, she closed the distance between us, her hand finding mine, her fingers intertwining with mine. The warmth of her touch sent a jolt of electricity through me, igniting a fire that I hadn't known existed. Under the hazy Durham sky, with the city lights twinkling like fallen stars, our lips met for the first time. The kiss was tentative at first, a gentle exploration, a question whispered against the cool night air. Then, as if a dam had broken, it deepened, becoming something urgent, consuming. The world around us faded away, leaving only the two of us, lost in the moment. The taste of her lips, a heady mix of sweet anticipation and undeniable desire. It was a kiss that spoke of unspoken desires, a silent promise of something more. A kiss that changed everything. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of stolen moments and shared secrets. The kiss on the rooftop bar had shattered the fragile barrier of politeness we'd maintained, unleashing a torrent of pent-up desire. We spent hours tangled in each other's arms, exploring the boundaries of our newfound intimacy, our bodies speaking a language that transcended words. My apartment, once a sanctuary of organized solitude, became our shared haven, filled with the echoes of our laughter and the lingering scent of Cameron's perfume. We devoured each other with a hunger that bordered on desperation, each touch a revelation, each kiss a confirmation of the undeniable connection between us. The crisp autumn air, tinged with the scent of wood smoke and fallen leaves, seemed to crackle with unspoken desires, mirroring the growing intensity of our relationship. We explored Durham together, hand in hand, discovering hidden cafes tucked away on cobblestone streets, antique bookstores filled with the musty scent of forgotten stories, and quiet parks where we could steal kisses beneath the watchful gaze of ancient oak trees. We talked for hours, sharing our hopes, our dreams, our fears. I learned about Cameron's childhood, her fierce determination to fight for social justice, her unwavering belief in the power of community. She, in turn, learned about my passion for wine, my carefully curated life, my secret desire to break free from the gilded cage of my upbringing. With each shared confidence, each whispered secret, the bond between us deepened, becoming something stronger, something more profound than I had ever experienced. I felt a lightness, a giddiness I hadn't known before. The world seemed sharper, brighter, as though viewed through a new lens. Even the mundane tasks of daily life, grocery shopping, laundry, paying bills, became imbued with a sense of joy, simply because I knew that at the end of the day, I would be back in Cameron's arms. I was completely, utterly, and irrevocably falling for her. One rainy Sunday afternoon, curled up on my couch with Cameron, a mug of hot chocolate warming my hands, the scent of cinnamon and rain filling the air, I knew I couldn't keep my feelings bottled up any longer. The words had been swirling inside me for weeks, a silent mantra echoing in my heart. I stammered, my heart pounding in my chest, a nervous flutter in my stomach. I think I'm falling for you, Cameron. The words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken emotion. The rain beat against the windows, a gentle rhythm against the backdrop of our shared silence. I held my breath, waiting for her response, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. A slow smile spread across her face, transforming her features, making her gray eyes sparkle with an intensity that made my breath catch in my throat. I think I'm falling for you too, Hazel, she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. And with that admission, the last vestiges of restraint crumbled. We surrendered to the pull between us, our bodies moving together in a dance as old as time. The gentle patter of rain against the windows became a soundtrack to our burgeoning passion. The world outside faded away, leaving only the two of us, lost in a haze of whispered confessions and shared breaths. My apartment, once a carefully curated space of minimalist design and expensive artwork, transformed into our shared sanctuary. Books overflowed from the shelves onto the floor, a chaotic jumble of literature and philosophy. Cameron's brightly colored scarves and protest buttons adorned the otherwise neutral decor, adding a splash of vibrancy to my muted palette. The scent of her sandalwood incense mingled with the aroma of freshly brewed coffee and the lingering notes of the wines I sampled for my work, creating a unique olfactory tapestry that spoke of our intertwined lives. It wasn't just a physical space anymore, it was a reflection of our growing intimacy, a tangible representation of the life we were building together. Every corner held a memory, every object a silent testament to the love that blossomed within those walls. Our nights were filled with a feverish exploration of each other's bodies, a dance of whispered moans and shared breaths. We learned the language of touch, the subtle nuances of pressure and caress. We discovered hidden erogenous zones, secret pathways to pleasure that left us breathless and wanting more. Our lovemaking wasn't just about physical gratification, it was an expression of our deepest emotions, a way of communicating the things we couldn't put into words. It was a silent conversation, a whispered promise of commitment and devotion. In the quiet darkness of my bedroom, with the city lights twinkling outside the window, we built a world of our own. A world where nothing existed but the two of us, lost in the intoxicating embrace of passion and desire. The crisp autumn air, seeping in through the slightly open window, carried the scent of burning leaves and the distant rumble of city life, a subtle reminder of the world outside, a world that seemed to fade into insignificance against the backdrop of our shared intimacy. One evening, while I showcased a new vintage Pinot Noir, the rich aroma of ripe berries and earthy undertones filling the air, Cameron reached across the small table in my kitchen, her fingers intertwining with mine. The flickering candlelight danced in her gray eyes, illuminating the depths of emotion swirling within them. "You make me feel things I never thought possible, Hazel," she confessed, her voice soft and vulnerable, a stark contrast to the fiery rhetoric she employed in her social justice work. I squeezed her hand, my heart swelling with a wave of tenderness. The wine, usually the focus of my attention, seemed insignificant compared to the raw emotion radiating from Cameron. I wanted to tell her how much she meant to me, how she had turned my carefully ordered world upside down and filled it with a vibrant chaos I never knew I craved. But the words seemed inadequate, pale imitations of the feeling swirling within me. Instead, I raised my glass to hers, our fingers brushing as the crystal chimed. "To us," I whispered, my gaze locking with hers, a silent promise passing between us. Later that night, tangled in my sheets, the scent of wine and sandalwood lingering on our skin, we made love with a slow, deliberate intensity that left us breathless. Our movements were languid, each touch a whispered promise, each caress a declaration of love. The world outside faded away, the city lights blurring into a hazy backdrop, leaving only the two of us, lost in a sea of shared sensations. I traced the curve of her spine, my fingertips mapping the delicate landscape of her body, memorizing every freckle, every scar. She arched against me, her breath coming in short, sharp gasps, her fingers digging into my hips. The orange glow of the bedside lamp cast long shadows across the room, transforming us into abstract figures in a painting of desire. We moved together, our bodies intertwined, our souls merging in a symphony of whispered moans and shared breaths. In that moment, suspended between reality and dreams, I knew I had found something rare and precious, something worth fighting for. The idyllic bubble we'd created, a world of whispered promises and shared intimacies, began to show cracks. A subtle shift in the atmosphere, a tension that hung heavy in the air like the humidity before a summer storm. Cameron became withdrawn, her usual vibrancy dimming, replaced by a quiet introspection that I couldn't quite decipher. The easy laughter that had once filled my apartment became a rarity, replaced by strange silences and forced smiles. She started working longer hours, her days at the nonprofit stretching late into the night, her phone buzzing with cryptic messages that she would quickly dismiss whenever I entered the room. I tried to ignore the nagging feeling of unease that settled in the pit of my stomach, telling myself it was just stress, the pressures of her demanding job. I tried to convince myself that the distance growing between us was just a temporary blip, a natural ebb and flow in the tide of our relationship. But the whispers started. Whispers of financial troubles, of a crippling debt Cameron had been trying to escape. I overheard snippets of hushed phone conversations, cryptic references to creditors and deadlines. I saw the worry etched on her face, the lines of fatigue deepening around her gray eyes. The carefree spirit I had fallen in love with seemed to be slowly suffocating under an invisible weight. I tried to broach the subject, to offer my support, but she deflected my concerns with a forced smile and a change of subject. "It's nothing, Hazel," she would say, her voice tight with an emotion I couldn't quite place. "Just work stuff. Don't worry about it." But the worry was already there, a knot tightening in my chest. I wanted to help, to be the strong one, the shoulder to cry on, but she pushed me away, building walls around herself, brick by brick, until I felt like I was standing outside a fortress, locked out and helpless. The more I tried to get close, the further she retreated, the chasm between us widening with each passing day. The intimacy we had shared, the open communication that had been the bedrock of our relationship, began to erode, replaced by a fragile facade of normalcy that threatened to shatter at any moment. One night, after a particularly strained dinner of reheated takeout and stilted conversation, the truth finally spilled out. We were sitting on the couch, a comfortable silence stretching between us. A silence that felt heavier, more oppressive than usual. Cameron was staring out the window, her gaze fixed on the city lights twinkling in the distance. I reached for her hand, my fingers brushing against hers. She flinched, a barely perceptible movement, but enough to send a jolt of anxiety through me. "Cameron," I said softly, my voice barely above a whisper, "what's going on? Please, talk to me." She turned to me, her gray eyes glistening with unshed tears. The sight of her, so vulnerable, so unlike the strong, confident woman I knew, tore at my heart. She took a deep breath, her shoulders slumping as if a heavy weight had finally been lifted. "I'm drowning, Hazel," she confessed, her voice choked with emotion. "I'm drowning in debt." The words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken fear and shame. She went on to explain the details, the mounting interest, the harassing phone calls, the looming threat of legal action. It was a story of bad decisions and desperate measures, a story that painted a picture of a woman struggling to stay afloat in a sea of financial despair. The fear in her gray eyes was palpable, a raw, visceral emotion that mirrored the growing sense of dread in my own heart. The idyllic bubble we had created had burst, shattered by the harsh reality of Cameron's past, leaving us exposed and vulnerable in the face of a storm we weren't sure we could weather. I wanted to be her rock, her anchor in the storm. I wanted to tell her that we would face this together, that I would help her navigate the treacherous waters of her financial crisis. But Cameron's pride, her deep-seated shame at having hidden the truth from me for so long, created an invisible barrier between us. She pushed me away, her words laced with a mixture of self-loathing and defensiveness. "You don't understand, Hazel," she said, her voice brittle. "This is my mess and I need to fix it myself." I tried to argue, to reason with her, but it was like talking to a brick wall. The more I reached out, the more she retreated, withdrawing into herself, building walls around her heart, brick by brick. The shared intimacy we had once cherished, the open communication that had been the foundation of our relationship, crumbled under the weight of unspoken fears and simmering resentment. The vibrant energy that had once drawn me to Cameron, the fiery passion that had ignited our love, seemed to flicker and fade, replaced by a quiet desperation that haunted her eyes. She started working even longer hours, taking on extra shifts at the nonprofit and picking up odd jobs wherever she could find them. She was rarely home, and when she was distant, preoccupied, her mind miles away. The apartment, once our shared sanctuary, became a constant reminder of the growing distance between us. The silence was deafening, broken only by the occasional hum of the refrigerator or the distant sirens of the city outside. I wandered through the rooms, my fingers tracing the outlines of her absent presence, the scent of her sandalwood incense a bittersweet reminder of what we had lost. The vibrant scarves and protest buttons that had once added a touch of color to my life now seemed like mocking reminders of the woman she used to be, the woman I was slowly losing. One evening after another late night at work, Cameron came home smelling of something unfamiliar, something that wasn't her usual sandalwood and soap. It was a perfume, sweet and floral, a scent that clung to her clothes, her hair, her skin. My stomach clenched, a knot of anxiety tightening in my chest. I tried to ignore it, to dismiss it as a figment of my overactive imagination, but the scent lingered, a persistent reminder of something amiss. When I asked her about it, her explanation was vague, unconvincing. "It's nothing," she said, her voice a little too high, a little too quick. "Just someone at work." We hugged. The words felt hollow, empty, and something inside me cracked. A tiny fissure in the foundation of my trust, a hairline fracture that threatened to spread and shatter everything we had built together. I wanted to believe her. I desperately wanted to believe her. But the doubt had been planted, a seed of suspicion taking root in the fertile ground of my insecurities. The scent of the perfume lingered in the air, a silent accusation, a constant reminder of the growing distance between us and the secrets Cameron was keeping. The easy comfort we had once shared was replaced by a palpable tension, a silent battle waged between my desperate hope for the truth and the gnawing fear of what that truth might be. The city lights outside the window, once a romantic backdrop to our whispered confessions, now seemed cold and distant, mirroring the growing chill in my heart. The air in the apartment became thick with unspoken accusations and simmering resentment. The scent of the unfamiliar perfume, though faint, lingered like a ghost, a constant reminder of the lie Cameron had told, the secret she was keeping. We moved through the apartment like strangers, our bodies carefully avoiding contact, the once comforting silence now charged with tension. I tried to maintain a semblance of normalcy, to go through the motions of our daily routine, but the effort felt hollow, a charade we both knew was unsustainable. Every shared glance, every casual touch, was laced with suspicion and unspoken questions. The vibrant energy that had once filled our space was replaced by a heavy, oppressive stillness, the silence punctuated by the ticking of the clock, each tick a hammer blow against the fragile remnants of our trust. I knew I couldn't ignore the nagging doubt any longer. One evening, after another of Cameron's late nights, I finally confronted her. The words spilled out of me, a torrent of accusations fueled by weeks of pent-up frustration and fear. I asked her about the perfume, about the late nights, about the hushed phone calls and the cryptic messages. I demanded to know the truth, my voice trembling with a mixture of anger and desperation. She denied everything, her gray eyes, once so full of warmth and affection, now cold and distant. She told me I was being paranoid, that I was imagining things, that the stress of her financial situation was making me irrational. Her denials, so vehement, so absolute, only fueled my suspicion. The more she protested, the more convinced I became that she was hiding something, that the truth was far more complicated, far more painful than I could imagine. The fight escalated, fueled by months of unspoken anxieties and simmering resentment. The apartment, once our sanctuary, became a battleground. Harsh words were exchanged, accusations hurled like grenades, each one exploding and leaving behind a trail of emotional shrapnel. I accused her of lying, of betrayal, of shattering the trust we had so carefully built. She countered with accusations of my own, accusing me of being insensitive, of not understanding the pressures she was under, of abandoning her when she needed me the most. We circled each other, two wounded animals trapped in a cage of our own making, our love a twisted, mangled thing barely recognizable beneath the layers of hurt and betrayal. The city lights outside the window, once a symbol of our shared dreams, now seemed like mocking witnesses to our unraveling. The rain began to fall, a steady drumming against the window panes, mirroring the relentless pounding of my heart. I felt exhausted, drained, my body heavy with the weight of unspoken grief. Finally, on the verge of tears, I begged her to tell me the truth. "Please, Cameron," I whispered, my voice hoarse with emotion. "Just tell me the truth. I can handle it. Just, please." The dam finally broke. Cameron's carefully constructed facade crumbled, replaced by a raw, vulnerable honesty that was both heartbreaking and terrifying. The truth came in the form of a tearful confession, a story of desperation and compromised morals. To pay off her debts, she had resorted to compromising situations, accepting money from wealthy patrons in exchange for companionship. The words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken shame and regret. My heart shattered into a million pieces, the fragments scattering like dust in the wind. The woman I loved, the woman I had believed in, had betrayed me in the most intimate way possible. The rain continued to fall, a relentless downpour that mirrored the storm raging within me. I couldn't breathe. The air in the apartment, already thick with tension, now felt suffocating, heavy with the weight of Cameron's confession. The rain continued its relentless assault against the windows, a mournful soundtrack to the implosion of my world. I stared at her, my mind reeling, trying to process the enormity of her betrayal. The woman I loved, the woman I had shared my life with, had sold herself, piece by piece, to pay off debts that now seemed insignificant compared to the gaping chasm that had opened up between us. The intimacy we had shared, the whispered promises and shared dreams, now felt tainted, tarnished by the knowledge of her desperate acts. I couldn't bear the thought of her with those other people, the imagined scenarios playing in my mind like a twisted, macabre film reel. The scent of the unfamiliar perfume, once a nagging suspicion, now became a symbol of her deception, a constant reminder of the violation I felt deep within my soul. I stumbled back, my hands flying to my mouth to stifle a sob. I couldn't look at her, couldn't bear to see the shame and regret etched on her face. I turned and fled to the bedroom, the familiar sanctuary now feeling like a prison. I grabbed a suitcase from the closet, my movements robotic, my mind numb with shock and disbelief. I threw clothes into the bag, a chaotic jumble of fabrics and colors, my hands trembling as I struggled to fasten the zipper. I didn't know where I was going, what I would do, but I knew I couldn't stay there, not in that apartment, not with the ghost of our shattered love haunting every corner. I needed to escape, to breathe, to find a space where the air wasn't thick with betrayal and heartbreak. I walked out of the apartment, the slam of the door echoing the finality of our broken promises. The rain had stopped, leaving the city streets glistening under the pale moonlight. I didn't look back, didn't dare to look back, for fear that I would see Cameron standing in the doorway, her gray eyes pleading for forgiveness. I hailed a cab, the driver's indifferent gaze a welcome anonymity. As the city lights blurred past the rain-streaked windows, I felt a wave of grief wash over me. A tidal wave of sorrow that threatened to drown me in its intensity. I had lost her, lost the woman who had brought light and laughter into my life, the woman who had shown me the meaning of true love. And in losing her I had lost a part of myself, a part I wasn't sure I could ever recover. The following weeks were a blur of numb despair and sleepless nights. I moved in with a friend, her quiet sympathy a stark contrast to the tumultuous emotions raging within me. I tried to immerse myself in work, seeking solace in the familiar routines of the vineyard, the earthy scent of the grapessa a temporary distraction from the ache in my heart. But the image of Cameron, her gray eyes filled with shame and regret, haunted my every waking moment. I saw her face in the swirling patterns of the wine, heard her voice in the rustling leaves of the vines. I tried to erase her from my memory, to push her image from my mind, but the more I tried, the more persistent her presence became, a constant reminder of what I had lost. The city of Durham, once a symbol of our burgeoning love, now felt like a ghost town, every street corner, every cafe, every bar, a painful reminder of our shared past. I wandered through the Duke Gardens, seeking solace amongst the roses, their fragrant beauty a stark contrast to the ugliness that had festered within my heart. The rain began to fall again, a soft drizzle that mirrored the tears I could no longer hold back. And that's when I saw her. She was sitting on a bench near the rose garden, her head bowed, her shoulders slumped as if bearing an invisible weight. She looked paler, thinner, the vibrant energy that had once drawn me to her now dimmed, replaced by a quiet weariness that mirrored my own. The rain plastered her dark hair to her forehead, and for a moment I saw her not as the woman who had betrayed me, but as the woman I had fallen in love with, the woman with the fiery spirit and the compassionate heart. My breath caught in my throat, a painful ache spreading through my chest. I wanted to turn and run, to escape the raw emotions her presence evoked, but my feet felt rooted to the spot. My body drawn to her like a moth to a flame. We talked for hours, sitting on that rain-soaked bench, the scent of roses mingling with the earthy aroma of wet soil. The air was thick with unspoken emotions, the silence punctuated by the gentle patter of rain and the occasional croak of a frog. Cameron explained everything, the details of her desperation, the mounting pressure from creditors, the fear of losing everything she had worked so hard to achieve. She spoke of the shame and regret she felt, the self-loathing that had consumed her in the weeks since I had left. She didn't try to excuse her actions, didn't try to minimize the pain she had caused. She simply laid bare her soul, revealing the raw, vulnerable truth of her desperation. I listened, my heart aching with a mixture of anger and lingering love. I heard the pain in her voice, the genuine remorse that resonated in every word. And as I listened, I began to understand, not to condone, but to understand the circumstances that had led her to make such devastating choices. The anger I had felt, the burning resentment that had consumed me for weeks, began to dissipate, replaced by a wave of sadness, a profound sense of loss for the love we had shared, the future we had envisioned. I realized that despite the pain she had caused, the love I felt for Cameron hadn't completely vanished. It was still there, buried beneath the layers of hurt and betrayal, a flickering ember waiting to be rekindled. I saw the genuine regret in her gray eyes, the desperate hope for forgiveness. And in that moment, sitting on that rain-soaked bench, surrounded by the fragrant beauty of the roses, I knew I couldn't hold on to the anger any longer. Forgiveness wasn't about condoning her actions, it was about releasing the bitterness that was poisoning my soul. It was about acknowledging the complexities of love, the messy, imperfect reality of human relationships. It was about recognizing that sometimes, even in the darkest of times, love can find a way to bloom again, stronger and more resilient than before. We didn't make any grand pronouncements, didn't exchange promises of a happily ever after. We simply acknowledged the pain we had both endured, the long, difficult road ahead. The path to redemption wouldn't be easy. It would require patience, understanding, and a willingness to confront the ghosts of our past. But as I looked into Cameron's eyes, I saw a flicker of hope, a shared understanding that maybe, just maybe, we could find a way back to each other, back to the love we had almost lost. The rain continued to fall. A gentle cleansing rain that washed away the remnants of our anger and resentment, leaving behind a fragile seed of hope, a promise of a new beginning. Months later, the shadows of the past had begun to recede, replaced by the warm glow of a renewed hope. Cameron had worked tirelessly to repay her debts, taking on extra shifts, selling some of her prized possessions, and accepting help from friends and family. It was a long, arduous process, a testament to her determination to rebuild her life, to reclaim her self-respect. I watched her throughout this journey, my admiration growing with each hurdle she overcame. The fiery spirit that had initially drawn me to her had been tempered by the trials she had endured, replaced by a quiet strength, a resilience that shone through even in the darkest of moments. The distance that had grown between us had slowly dissolved, replaced by a newfound understanding, a deeper appreciation for the complexities of love and forgiveness. We started spending time together again, tentative at first, like two wary animals testing the waters. We revisited our favorite haunts, the dimly lit jazz clubs, the cozy cafes, the quiet parks where we had once stolen kisses under the watchful gaze of ancient oak trees. The memories we had made together, once tinged with pain and regret, began to regain their luster, becoming cherished reminders of the love we had almost lost. One evening, with the city lights twinkling outside my apartment window, Cameron announced that she had made her final payment, that she was finally free from the crushing weight of her debt. We celebrated by uncorking a bottle of vintage champagne I had been saving for a special occasion. The crisp, celebratory pop of the cork echoed through the apartment, a symbol of our fresh start. We clinked our glasses, the bubbles dancing on our tongues, a testament to the sweetness of redemption. We talked for hours that night, sharing our hopes and dreams for the future, a future we now envisioned together. The air in the apartment was no longer charged with tension and unspoken accusations, but filled with a quiet understanding, a renewed sense of hope. The orange glow of the setting sun painted the walls a warm, inviting hue, mirroring the warmth that had returned to our hearts. Later that night, wrapped in each other's arms, the city lights twinkling like distant stars, we rediscovered the intimacy we had almost lost. It was different now, deeper, more meaningful, forged in the fires of hardship and tempered by the strength of our enduring love. We moved together slowly, deliberately, savoring each touch, each caress, each whispered word of affection. There was a tenderness, a vulnerability in our lovemaking that hadn't been there before, a recognition of the fragile beauty of our rekindled connection. The shadows of the past receded completely, replaced by the warm glow of our shared present, the promise of a future built on trust and understanding. As we lay intertwined, our bodies still humming with the aftershocks of our passion, I traced the curve of Cameron's spine, my fingertips mapping the familiar landscape of her body, a silent reaffirmation of our love. The orange glow of the sunrise painted the sky as we lay intertwined, our hearts finally at peace. A new chapter was unfolding before us, a chapter filled with the promise of shared adventures, of laughter and tears, of triumphs and setbacks. We had weathered the storm, emerged from the darkness stronger and more resilient than before. And as I looked into Cameron's gray eyes, I saw a reflection of my own happiness, a shared understanding that our love, like the finest vintage wine, had only deepened and grown richer with time. The Durham haze, once a symbol of uncertainty and heartbreak, now represented a new beginning, a fresh start, a testament to the enduring power of love and forgiveness.